Hi there. I'm Susan Downs. This is the Silicon Valley Health Institute. We want to bring you top experts to give you information so you can be proactive in your health. As you know, if you get lab values that are normal, that means they're normal compared to 95% of a very ill population. And we know that a lot of doctors kind of treat symptoms, give a pill for an ill. I mean, I call that sick care, disease management. We want more than that. We want to be proactive and we want to get this information out to you. We used to be a forum, so that means sharing information back and forth. So I will make a copy of this. If you want a copy of this, put it in the chat or email me. I'll put that information in and I will send you a copy of this. We are being heavily censored. So on YouTube, we've got to transfer everything to Rumble. We're in the process. So, and if we get porn bombed, then what I'm going to do is shut off the meeting. I'll announce that and then just come back and that in the past to solve the problem. So today we are very honored to have Antony Haynes. He is a top draw nutritionist in the UK, and I recommend him as one of the top 3 healers in the world. I mean, please go to
Too,
him. He's brilliant. That's a
too
good
much,
say.
too much.
He's passionate about the subject of nutrition and how targeted nutritional therapy can benefit people's lives. He's been this way for over 3 decades. He's been in private practice for over 33 years and is one of the most experienced registered nutritionists in the country. He's one of the first practitioners to implement the principles of functional medicine in the UK since 1992.
Mm.
He's had over 19,000 clients. He's presented over 350 lectures and webinars and is known as the first person to present on the subject of fatty pancreas in the in the UK, and now in the US. He's been using and recommending nutritional supplements since 1990 and has dedicated many hundreds of hours to the subject as witnessing their impact and influence on human health since that time. He's also a very spiritual, big-hearted man, and I can't say enough positive things about him. I think Anthony's tremendous. So we're very happy to have you here, Anthony. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's great to be back with the SVHI and also to see some friendly faces and or names on the list of attendees. So thank you very much for taking time out. You could indeed be doing something different. Maybe some of you are doing something at the same time as listening to this, which means you're doubling up, which generally means that you must be female with a brain that can do those sorts of things at the same time. When I graduated in 1992, there were 63 in the class. There were 3 men and 60 women. And I was involved in teaching nutrition and have been ever since. And I was teaching at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, which Patrick Holfer founded. So DIP-ION is the nomenclature for that. And still the numbers remain the same. I was at an ION day on Saturday and there were 2 men and 60 women in the audience. So the ratio just hasn't changed. So there we have it. Pleasure to be here. It was the first time I think that anyone has ever presented on the subject of fatty pancreas. It's linked with fatty liver, so that's what the joint conversation is. And I've got about 50 slides. We're going to sort of go through at the usual speed, which is fast, so you get the gist of things. It's just really just bringing this particular subject matter to our attention and our knowing, because both with fatty liver and fatty pancreas, to get a good diagnosis, you need ultrasonography to be able to confirm it, and that's not what we're going to be necessarily doing, but there are indicators and markers from other tests and other sensors of signs and symptoms, which I'll talk about. And also there's ways to help prevent it. So just really, it's an insight into something which has been there. I think it's been identified in 1920s. I think 1926 was the first time I think we'll come across that. So 98 years old is the awareness of fatty pancreas, and the only way they could discover it, indeed up until the scanning capacity existed, was through cadaver assessment. So it wasn't something that was possible to be determined otherwise. So let's dig in what we're going to cover. So we'll look about who's got fatty pancreas and fatty liver, look at the connection between the two things, what testing can we do for this, and really it's the ultrasonography. I'll briefly cover that. My sister-in-law is an ultrasonographer at Basingstoke Hospital in Hampshire in England, and she doesn't have this piece of kit, and she very rarely assesses the pancreas with the ultrasound when I checked in with her about this. It's interesting, there is a link, not surprisingly, when we look at the metabolic things that lead to fatty pancreas between it and atherosclerosis, the development of heart disease. And then we'll look at another axis. So we heard of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the hypothalamic pituitary hormonal axes, etc. We've got not the gut brain axis, but the gut pancreas liver axis. So we've got that interconnection between these different organs. We'll also look at the impact of the gut microbiota and how that influences that scenario, as well as fatty liver and fatty pancreas. I'll introduce you maybe an important point. There are key antioxidants. Again, antioxidants feature such an important thing to be shown to be helpful in pancreatitis, but also in helping fatty pancreas. But no one in the world, no one literally in the world, has any series of clients who've had fatty pancreas who've then reversed it. It just doesn't exist because no one has done these tests or studies. So it's kind of, as you'll find in the next, I think the word nascent, it's in it, although it's been appreciated for going on 100 years, in terms of the ability to actually modulate it and prove it, that's still in its nascent stages. We'll look at specific supplements that can also help to reduce fatty liver and fatty pancreas. And this is interesting. My third or fourth client, I wish I could remember which, but I can certainly remember this. They arrived at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, where I had a clinic room, and they had pancreatitis. So actually, one of my first clients ever had pancreatitis. So I went to the library, and I looked at papers, and I bought my card from the library. I had to put certain money, pounds and pence, on my card, put it into the machine, photocopied the papers, took them home, read it, and it was papers from the Manchester Infirmary, Manchester in the middle of England, and they were conducting studies back then in 1990, 1991, 92, and then since then on the use of antioxidants for pancreatitis. So this person was having pain and was vomiting after meals of pancreatitis, and they took this antioxidant that I found, and I'll actually share it with you. It's a biotics research product. And after being in pain for 6 months continually, every single day, without much respite, effectively, not much really medical care, they were out of pain, out of discomfort from taking this simple antioxidant. So it's sort of, it takes me back to the beginning of my career in nutrition, although I first got into nutrition in 1980 when I was 15. So let's have a look. So here that's just putting it in perspective, the pancreas and the liver. There we go. And so 1926, it was first recognized, intrapancreatic fat, IPF. But the knowledge of it and its implications are still in their baby stages, effectively. And the term is pancreatic steatosis, in the same way we have hepatic steatosis. And it's a general term for the accumulation of fat in the liver. It seems that intralobular pancreatic fat is a significant indicator for the presence of fatty liver. And fat infiltration leads to insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and pancreatic cancer, in the same way that liver issues and fatty liver can lead to NASH and cirrhosis, and then potentially liver cancer too. So, and it's a metabolic process, effectively, rather than one organ affecting the other. It's the same metabolic process happening body-wide. So it's gaining attention. I looked at the research and the graph of all the published studies. I did actually a PubMed search for fatty liver, and there were 355,000 entries for that. I did fatty pancreas, there were 16,000 entries, but a vast majority were since the year 2000. So it really is, it's very, very fresh. And researchers have wondered whether, I guess this is not Jerry Reven who coined the term metabolic syndrome, but whether fatty pancreas is the silent spectator, i.e., is it simply just there and no problem, or is it the fifth component, not the fifth element, which is a fantastic film, I think, or was it the fifth component of metabolic syndrome? So dietary intervention is a cornerstone, and the most practical way to resolve fatty liver and fatty pancreas is to lose weight if one is overweight. But as you'll see from the statistics, not everyone who has fatty liver or fatty pancreas is indeed overweight, and that makes me curious. There are also nutritional supplements that can specifically help to reverse a fatty pancreas, as far as I'm aware, certainly reverse fatty liver. So fatty liver, recognized as one of the most common causes of liver issues in the world. Its prevalence is growing up to sometimes more than 30% of adults in countries have fatty liver. It's extraordinary. And this means that we're going to have fatty pancreas too. The majority of patients have a simple steatosis, so there's a buildup of fat in the liver, but it can progress to NASH and then cirrhosis and then liver cancer too. So what I've done here with the slides, which I shall send to you, Susan, and you can give access to your folk, these slides, they're all referenced and hyperlinked as well. So it's just easier to access the papers and have a look yourself. So here we have, in 2019, a study was on a fatty liver, and they found that 6 out of 10 diabetics have fatty liver. What about the other 4? And 9 of of 10 severely obese, I guess that's morbid obesity with perhaps a BMI greater than 35 or 40, have fatty liver. So I've got a question, and it's really a rhetorical question, but I'd love an answer perhaps in the chat, which Susan can be the MC of later on. But why is that one person who's severely overweight, they walk in the room and you can see their belly first, and it's that very, very large individual, how come they haven't got fatty liver? I mean, why not? What's going on? What gene SNPs? What is going on? How are they protected from that? Interestingly, for 1 out of 4 people, regardless of weight, have fatty liver. So that's a big number. And here we've got a global image of those people with type 2 diabetes and the incidence of those with diabetes and the presence of fatty liver, and it's 68% Europe. Europe tops the list on this particular study. So, and West Asia, which is the Middle East, and that dot there is near Dubai, for example. It's amazing how I wouldn't have put Europe first, but it is indeed tops, although it's a close call. And in Africa, on average, people are leaner and they have much less fatty liver, but even there, it's a relatively high percentage of diabetics. Now, this next one is a study of an amazing number of people. It's 8.5 million people been assessed, and basically the darker the color, the higher the incidence of fatty liver risk. And so you see dark red, so that's North America, certain parts of Europe, Scotland. You see the top of England, Scotland. Apparently, Glasgow has one of the worst reputations for health conditions. I think the deep fried Mars bars probably don't really help. And Finland as well. Interesting, isn't it? And then Australia. So all the westernized countries have a higher incidence than others, effectively. So that's a wide ranging assessment in 2018. So again, this study that they looked at, 9 to 32% of the general population of India have fatty liver, with a higher prevalence of those who are overweight, of course, and or have diabetes. In recent times, fatty liver has been increasing in kids, which makes me feel very sad, thereby increasing its overall impact. Imagine if you have fatty liver as a kid, what's the prognosis thereafter? So again, a reminder of the anatomy, physiology of the liver and the pancreas. And now I have a pop quiz. So the pop quiz is this. And maybe you can put it in the chat, and we'll get to the answer at the end. How much of the pancreas, so what percentage weight of the tissue of the pancreas is devoted to making insulin and glucagon, and what percentage of the pancreas is devoted to making the pancreatic enzymes, digestive enzymes, i.e. its exocrine function? If you could put your answers on a postcard. No, don't put your answers on a postcard, put them in the chat. So now we have NAFPD. So we've got these acronyms, a non-alcoholic fatty pancreas disease. So it's basically it's pancreatic steatosis, and it's in the absence of too much alcohol, which could contribute to that. So saying apart from the alcohol, apart from viral infections or toxins, or indeed something like a congenital metabolic syndrome, and I'll talk to you about one of those, which is hugely relevant. And I think will be a subject matter which your audience, Susan, may be very interested in, because I'll talk to you about that in a moment, which has got to do with iron storage. Basically, fatty pancreas is associated with insulin resistance, malnutrition, obesity, metabolic syndrome, getting older, pancreatic fibrosis, and pancreatic cancer. So yeah, so fatty liver, if we identify fatty pancreas, so if we identify early, it may be that we could take steps to intervene to prevent the decline. It's most commonly found, just like fatty liver, in those who are overweight. In one study, interestingly, about 70% of those with fatty liver and fatty pancreas had them at the same time. I'm curious about why the 30% didn't have a fatty pancreas, for example. So the association of fatty pancreas and fatty liver is about 70%. But what's interesting is the negative predictive value of fatty liver and a normal pancreas was 96%. So basically, it's suggesting, as far as I can see, this is what the literature says, that the fatty pancreas may be the initial indicator of what's called ectopic fat deposition, and maybe the early marker of insulin resistance and fatty liver, previous to fatty liver, and a marker of metabolic syndrome. So it may be that only if ultrasonographers or doctors who knew could then refer clients for an assessment of their pancreas before their liver, they may not have a fatty liver, but they may have the development of a fatty pancreas. Okay, so a study involving post-mortem, so this is the original method of identifying fatty pancreas. In 80 patients, they found that pancreatic fat was a significant predictor of fatty liver. So this is obviously in dead patients. The study demonstrated that the two things are related, and it seems to be mediated by general obesity. But remember, the 1 out of 10 severely obese individuals did not have fatty liver, and not everyone with fatty liver has fatty pancreas. So the association has been identified effectively. In a 2023 meta-analysis, looking at a large number of people, I think it was about 68,000 people, they observed, again, a significant association between fatty liver and fatty pancreas of 92%. So again, studies vary, but it shows you the strong connection between the two. Fatty pancreas was significantly associated with having fatty liver and vice versa. And so again, just repeating the information. So here the ultrasonographer is assessing someone who doesn't look particularly overweight, and she doesn't seem to be assessing his liver, but I think it's an abdominal scan. But nonetheless, what's the method? So before the availability of medical imaging, it was only identified at necropsy, so autopsy work after someone died, or at the time of pancreatic surgery. So really, they were just unknown. So it was just unappreciated. And now there are a range of techniques, and it seems that of those different methods of imaging, the transabdominal ultrasonography, the TUS, is really the preferred method, just so we know. And that's the piece of kit that apparently that does the business. It's an Accuzon S3000. My sister-in-law, being an ultrasonographer, she doesn't have one of those in the NHS in Basingstoke Hospital in Hampshire, in England. But nonetheless, that's probably the best means of identifying. Now, very few of us are going to go and get that test done. I know in America, these things cost more than on the NHS in England. So it's unlikely we'll be able to get that sort of assessed. So there are other methods of identifying it. So now, briefly, not surprisingly, the same metabolic imbalances that contribute to fatty pancreas also contribute to the risk of atherosclerosis. It was 2018, there was the first study that showed that. So the study, first identified in 1926, but in terms of actually studies about its relevance in clinical life and other aspects of health, the first study was in 2018, looking at the connection between fatty pancreas and the development of fatty liver in patients with, atherosclerosis in patients with fatty liver. Again, another study confirming the connection between the two fatty organs. So we've got various different acronyms and so on. And what's interesting is that this study identified the connection between fatty pancreas and carotid intima media thickness, which is basically the means of identifying sort of just how much plaque development there is within the lining of the artery, effectively. So then we introduce the gut pancreas liver axis, another axis to consider. And this is a neat diagram. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's rather, so on the left-hand side, we've got a healthy gut lining with tight junctions. And on the right-hand side, in the red box on the lower left of the screen, we've got altered gut microbiota and this thing called increased gut permeability that Dr. Leo Galland first coined the term leaky gut back in the 1990s. And still, gastroenterologists are laughing at the notion about leaky gut existing. So I remember being laughed at in 2000, but they're still laughing on occasion. And yet the numbers of papers and studies conducted on leaky gut is in the thousands now. So you can see that if there's a problem in the gut, there's going to be a problem with the biliary aspect, problem with the liver. It's also going to negatively affect the pancreas effectively. And so really that's just showing us the connection between the different organs surrounding the gut. Of course, it's going to be a connection. And this slide describes the picture above. So I'm going to move on. So imbalance in gut bacteria, which is an American word called dysbiosis, promotes and accelerates a whole range of negative things from obesity and diabetes, fatty liver, but also can promote fatty pancreas too. So unwanted bacteria, elevated levels of certain bacteria, such as proteobacteria, which produce significant ethanol levels, could be responsible for a higher degree of liver injury, but also will affect the pancreas too. And in kids, there are certain bacteria which have been found to be significantly different between obese and NASH microbiome. So those kids with a liver disease versus obesity. So certainly the gut bacteria and the types of bacteria in there have a significant role to play. Again, that's an ongoing project, of course, the gut microbiome, but still hugely relevant. It was the Nobel Prize winner, who's actually a Ukrainian zoologist. His name momentarily escapes me. It'll come to me, but he said in Ukrainian or Russian, "Death begins in the colon," and he won a joint prize in Nobel Prize in 2008, perhaps when the Nobel Prizes meant something. Leaky gut, fatty liver, fatty pancreas. So yes, the damaged gut lining can lead to an increased levels of absorption of lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin from gram-negative bacteria. And so circulating zonulin or stool testing with zonulin can give you an indication of leaky gut, and also antibodies to LPS may be an even more accurate determinant as to whether the LPS is negative to health. So that's that information. You can see Alessio Fasano is actually an author on one of those papers, and he's really pioneered the use of zonulin as a test. Increasing experimental evidence shows that gut bacteria has an important impact, surprise, surprise, on pancreatic function and diseases. And it may be the metabolites for the bacteria that have a negative impact, such as short-chain fatty acids, or they modulate immune responses. And equally, and this is a really useful point because I wasn't taught this both undergraduate or postgraduate until recently, that the pancreatic factors, such as the excretion of antimicrobials, might have a substantial impact on the composition and functional properties of the gut microbiota. What I'm saying is that pancreatic juices have a regulatory effect on the gut bacteria. It's not just bile. So if you don't have adequate pancreatic enzymes, it's not just the maldigestion of food, but also it's the lack of control of gut bacteria. Equally, the same with bile. And often if there is a biliary issue, which is extremely common to have such a thing, then your bile won't regulate the gut bacteria, and nor will your pancreatic enzymes. The two things are intimately connected. The more of the burden on the pancreas, the more the liver has to deal with in terms of bile. The less the bile can do, the more the burden is on the pancreas. So a real burden. And because the digestive system works when the parasympathetic system is dominant, it's extremely common with our modern rushed living life by the clock lifestyles. I say ours, possibly not everyone who's listening. Then there's going to be an increased likelihood of digestive juice insufficiency, imbalanced gut bacteria, and then an increased risk of fatty pancreas and fatty liver in spite of being lean. So summary points to prevent and resolve fatty liver and fatty pancreas are repair and heal the gut lining. Yet again, it comes back to the gut. Repair and heal the gut lining, and that in itself, there are complexities, but also it's relatively straightforward. There are many different ways of achieving that. Optimize gut bacteria, if such a thing is knowable and possible to do. Pancreatic enzymes have a significant role to play, and I find pancreatic enzymes is one of the single most important and needed supplements for my clients, effectively, and I've identified that for years. Along with bile. So bile acts as a regulator of gut microbiota. And again, I would say the gallbladder and the pancreas frequently come up as the single most important organ for many clients with a whole array of different conditions. Very important to support that aspect of health. So in order to help fatty liver and fatty pancreas, antioxidants and certain nutrients can play a key role. Not surprisingly. Now, the Manchester Infirmary studies looked at basic antioxidants, so selenium, vitamin C, actually beta carotene, vitamin E, and methionine and NAC. And this work was done in 1990, maybe even late 1980s. When I had my third or fourth client with pancreatitis, I looked it up. I was going to the library, copying the papers, taking it back home, and then figuring out what to do, and then finding an antioxidant that contained that rough mix, which is very straightforward on the left-hand side. And that's when the client, after 6 months of distress every single day, after a few days of taking that antioxidant, they had no pain at all. So it was intriguing to see the manifestation of that. There are also other antioxidants that support and counteract fatty pancreas issues. Resveratrol, lycopene, turmeric, ginkgo biloba, astaxanthin, and I've got a couple of extras later on. So yes, fatty pancreas and pancreatitis have similar origins. So therefore, looking at the research on pancreatitis is useful, but what the diagnosis of pancreatitis has never done, it's never given the percentage or likelihood of a description of the fact that the individual also has fatty pancreas. It's just pancreatitis. And pancreatitis is a big continuum. And it's a bit of a scary word, I must admit, pancreatitis, oh my goodness. But I would estimate that many individuals are on the spectrum of having pancreatitis. And this is obviously much more severe, and this is less severe. I think many people have a degree of pancreatitis as well as pancreatic insufficiency. I think it's extremely common. But again, pathologically speaking, from a medical perspective, they won't be diagnosed until they're much further down the line, essentially. So the severity of pancreatitis and the levels of C-reactive protein have been found to be correlating also with fatty liver. And so fatty liver and fatty pancreas, the higher levels leads to high levels of organ failures and mortality in acute pancreatitis, which certainly will be a very unpleasant state, which is actually what my client presented with, because they had suffering and pain and indeed vomiting almost every day after they ate. And oxidative stress and inflammation, not surprisingly, are the hallmarks of a fatty liver and fatty pancreas. So it's logical to consider that antioxidants might mitigate fatty pancreas, therefore. This author, S. Speet, that's an interesting name, in 2021, confirmed that fatty pancreas indeed was a risk factor for pancreatitis. So again, we can take it for read that pancreatitis and fatty pancreas are probably very synonymous, more synonymous than fatty liver and fatty pancreas, in fact. So yes, the two are combined. And people with the high levels of blood fat, so high triglycerides in a blood test, now that could give an indication. We know it's an indication of fatty liver, but high triglycerides, possibly high levels of cholesterol, but particularly high triglycerides, is also a marker that points towards the likelihood of fatty pancreas. Antioxidants have long been identified to be protective of the pancreas, and the studies go back to 1998, 92, but there was actually papers in 1998 as well. So this really comes from the Manchester Infirmary, and there are lots of studies and researchers have conducted work from the Manchester Infirmary to confirm these findings. So the Manchester oxidant stress hypothesis, way back when, this is 1998 study, and basically they used methionine, vitamin C, and selenium, and they found it was very useful in 94 consecutive patients who came in with pancreatitis, and it helped their health. So remember, this is for pancreatitis, not fatty pancreas, but we can make an assumption that yes, and that it would have helped their fatty pancreas as well. So antioxidant therapy emerges as a safe and effective, we've heard that term before somewhere, antioxidant therapy emerges as a safe and effective medical alternative to surgery for chronic painful pancreatitis. So really, really insightful. 1998, obviously a long time ago. In 1990, before that time, they identified that 20 weeks in a double-blind placebo-controlled crossover, just using a relatively high dose of selenium, 600 mcg, a small amount of vitamin C, beta-carotene, and vitamin E and methionine, and a further 20 cases, they found effectively improvement in the pancreatitis using antioxidants. And then later on in the same location, this is Sirawardena, I think it's a Sri Lankan name, at Manchester Infirmary, published in the well-known journal Gut, identified this intravenous use of selenium and ascorbic acid and NAC had a benefit on acute pancreatitis. So then we talk about other antioxidants. So resveratrol, we're all familiar with that. It inhibits NF-kappa B and inflammation, and it influences gene transcription factors. And so it seems to be beneficial again in acute pancreatitis. It's difficult to get studies where they've looked at fatty pancreas, because although there are lots of 16,000 references since ever, the majority are not necessarily looking at antioxidants, because that will be a rare study, I suspect. But really, the antioxidants present a way forward to resolve fatty pancreas. Indeed, they do. So resveratrol, and here's a brief schematic of how resveratrol works. It basically reduces damage to the heart and lungs. It reduces the calcium overload by regulating calcium influx to cells. It helps mitochondrial function, supports the pancreas being normal, reduces reactive oxygen species, and generally an all-round good effect. This again is for acute pancreatitis, but read that it'd be useful for fatty pancreas as well. So resveratrol decreases damage to pancreatic tissue. Like so many things, excess calcium in the cell is cell toxic. So again, many factors can influence that. Obviously, adequate magnesium, but reducing oxidative stress helps that too. So resveratrol, very useful for protecting a whole array of tissues in the body. Lycopene, we have ongoing tomato puree from organic tomatoes from Italy, and we have a teaspoon or a tablespoon a day to maintain lycopene levels. It's good for the eyes, it's good for a range of different tissues, and prostate, of course. And it also helps with reducing NF-kappa B and helping pancreatitis. There you go. So maybe that's another reason why the Mediterranean diet is good for us. Curcumin from turmeric, not for everyone. It's not suitable for everyone. None of these things are useful or beneficial for everyone. How many people have you met or do you know don't tolerate turmeric very well? And green tea is not on this list, but Susan and I were speaking earlier, is that, and certainly green tea makes me feel muzzy-headed and unwell, and I cannot tolerate green tea extract or green tea or anything with green tea in it, even though I enjoy the taste, but I simply can't do it. Similarly with turmeric, I've had quite a few clients have an upregulated phase 1. Obviously, a relatively small percentage overall have an upregulated phase 1 when they take the turmeric, especially if it's in a form that's absorbed through the portal vein into the liver first. So it goes to liver pass first, upregulates phase 1, and then the phase 2 can't handle it. So I've actually found a fully emulsified turmeric, which gets into your bloodstream before it gets into your liver, and that I found to be useful. So I refer to that. It's a biotics research product. It's the only fully emulsified turmeric I've ever seen or ever found, and this may get around the negatives that some people might have with turmeric, because again, it's what goes through the liver pass first that might aggravate things. So turmeric, again, good benefits. Of course, we know it's anti-inflammatory, but just to show that, yes, this could be good for pancreas too. And there are references for turmeric and effectively indicators of pancreatitis. Ginkgo biloba features here too. In rats, in acute pancreatitis, it was found it was very good for helping a range of things, but helping bacterial translocation being reduced, so bacteria didn't get through the gut, intestinal mucosal cells, and also helping protect the cells within the pancreas as well, and lowering endotoxin levels. So ginkgo biloba typically used for microcirculation support and cardiovascular health. Guess what? It's good for the gut and good for pancreas as well. And there are references for you too there. Astaxanthin, big fan of astaxanthin. Why am I a big fan of it? I'm a big fan of astaxanthin because I like the fact that flamingos are pink. Did I say that? No, no. Flamingos are pink because they're eating astaxanthin. You know that. So the algae they're eating in the lakes is what gives them the pink color. In one particular lake in Africa, some toxins from some company poisoned the algae, and all the flamingos were white. You're aware of that story? So really, it's a very interesting thing to see a flock of, not a flock of seagulls, but a flock of flamingos. If I say that quickly, a flock of flamingos. Being white, and it's because the algae that contains this sort of orangey pink color wasn't present, and so their food supply didn't no longer had that particular pink color. But astaxanthin, fantastic antioxidant. It's one of the very, very few things, interestingly, that helps to maintain lean muscle mass if you're bedbound. Only very few things can do that. So leucine might do that too by stimulating the mammalian target of rapamycin, mTOR. But astaxanthin has been shown in elderly folk preventing their muscle loss, which is referred to as sarcopenia. So astaxanthin, very, very interesting. Really good all-round antioxidant. Helps inhibit TNF alpha, interleukin beta, interleukin 6, all these negatives which might drive pancreatitis. So again, astaxanthin, one of my favorite antioxidants, yet again features. I'm glad we've got a study associating it and pancreatitis, or a few studies. There we go, the references for astaxanthin. Berberine, I'm introducing this. Berberine, it seems to have hit the sort of popularity stakes. I'm not sure if that's because Ozempic wasn't available. And Ozempic, of course, is derived from a snake venom to paralyze your stomach, and there are all kinds of negative problems from that. But the berberine has been found to be very good for helping the gut bacteria, helping with fatty liver, but also helps with pancreas too. And it's been found as a promising agent in animal studies by, again, inhibiting those inflammatory cytokines, TNF alpha, interleukin 6, interleukin 1 beta, all these markers that basically promote inflammation and fat infiltration. And berberine can help to prevent that. So again, we can make it a very good assumption that berberine could be good for helping with fatty pancreas. And then probiotics. Here's a nice little slide from a 2019 paper showing that if the gut microbiota, the gut mucosa, you can see it may affect acute pancreatitis. It might lead and contribute to chronic pancreatitis, and then that might actually then lead to pancreatic cancer. So again, we can read fatty pancreas because, again, very few studies have looked at the markers they have with fatty liver, but not with fatty pancreas. But I think if we can address pancreatitis, you will be addressing the fat in the pancreas at the same time. And so I'm just going to summarize the nutrients I added on the berberine, the probiotics, but these nutrients effectively can help protect against the development of fatty pancreas, but also help to support every other tissue probably in the body. What I've done now is the next slide, I've translated these supplements these nutrients into supplements, specific supplements. And the first one is the one that I used in 1992 and have used ever since, with I almost have to say, without exception, in every single case of chronic pancreatitis, which is what I tend to see more often. I hardly ever see acute pancreatitis in the clinic. And it was BioProtect from Biotics Research. And it seems that this antioxidant fits like a glove in terms of affinity for the pancreas. I know there are many, many, many antioxidant formula that might contain similar things, but it was this particular one that really seems to match what the Manchester Infirmary were doing. And so it's vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A, zinc, selenium. It's got some lentil and pea, but it's got methionine, taurine, cysteine, glutathione, NAC. Actually, it should be NAC in there, maybe not. I thought there was NAC in there. Anyway, methionine, taurine, and a bit of CoQ10 in there. BioProtect. Now, NAC enhanced antioxidant from allergy research, I've used that a lot too. Beta-N anhydrous, which is also known as trimethylglycine, NAC, ribonucleic acid, and lipoic acid. I found that very useful as well. Resveratrol, if I was using, I wouldn't use all these, I would choose one or two of them, generally speaking. So transresveratrol and quercetin. Quercetin enhances the effects of resveratrol. Curcuma Rex. This is the fully emulsified extract of turmeric. I don't know anyone else in the world who does that. Curcuma Rex, fully emulsified, gets absorbed into the lymph system in the upper small intestine, and it will therefore not go through the liver pass. And therefore, this may be the turmeric of choice for those individuals who had a challenge in tolerating turmeric because of the negative impacts in the liver. On some way, ginkgo biloba, interestingly, so Bartic's research make a very good ginkgo biloba product. Astaxanthin, which is from this special trademarked or registered trademark astaxanthin, so it's a guaranteed quality. 12 milligrams once or twice a day. And berberine 500 is an allergy research product. And then there's a probiotic, which I found to be useful, called Complete. So rather than sort of leave you in the lurch and talk about nutrients without giving you something to actually, well, how would I get that? I would say BioProtect is proven time and again. I will say this every single case since that first case where I spent hours and hours researching what to do for a client. The BioProtect helped take them out of pain within a few days after 6 months of everyday pain. And I've used it ever since with every case of pancreatitis. It seems to be an uncanny, complete coincidence. I found it was effective. Again, I appreciate there are many, many, many antioxidant formerly out there, but that one seems to match like a glove the need for antioxidants for the pancreas. In terms of diet and lifestyle, well, it's no surprise for us here, but avoid refined sugar and carbohydrate. And add high fructose corn syrup. I believe that's more common in the States than it is in the UK. And trans fats. So my next question, this is the second quiz. The first one was what percentage of the pancreas is devoted to pancreatic function in terms of digestion, and how much is associated with insulin and glucagon. So that's one question to answer. The second question is, how long does it take for your body to clear trans fats once you've consumed them? So you consume them on day one. On what day in the future will your body have cleared those trans fats? Please write your answers on a postcard. A diet rich in a variety of antioxidants, obviously lycopene can be well obtained from tomato puree, for example. Curcumin is very poorly absorbed, and that's why I'd recommend the emulsified form. Balanced macronutrient intake. Don't have too many carbs. Maintain your insulin and cortisol, which are very important. You may or may not be aware that cortisol is fundamentally the villain when it comes to metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. It's elevated cortisol over time, which creates the insulin resistance. So that was a study from 2017, and it confirmed it. So it's not insulin's fault. It's elevated levels of cortisol, which is a powerful glucocorticoid, probably the most powerful hormone in our lifetimes, effectively. So stress and blood sugar imbalances and poor sleep can lead to an elevated cortisol levels. No large meals. Large meals, even if you're eating really healthy food, dangerous. Fry-ups. We have the expression fry-ups in England. No fry-ups or burned barbecued meats. They're very negative for inflammation. Anything that causes inflammation in the gut will affect the pancreas, possibly even before the liver. Avoid foods where you know you've got a reaction. So food sensitivities will cause inflammation, and then that will have an impact from immune complexes adversely affecting the pancreas too. And have a healthy balance of fatty acids. I typically don't recommend fatty acids in supplement form for someone who's got too much inflammation. I'd rather put the fire out and then consider the use of fatty acids, because of the double bonds are very attractive to oxidative stress. I know that the world's gone slightly omega-3 crazy. I know David Brownstein from Chicago, who's an expert in thyroid. He's a good man, and he's been speaking out in the last few years. I had the pleasure of meeting him and hosting him in England as he presented to our nutritionists here. But I remember I was sitting in a shop called John Lewis, which is quite a famous shop in Oxford Street, having lunch in the break. And he said this, he actually said this, quote unquote, he said, this whole fish oil thing is a scam. I didn't get it really at the time, but he did actually, really question mark why there's so many studies on fish oil being promoted. And I must admit, through muscle testing, I found that very few people test that well for fish oil. But I certainly think that consuming adequate omega-3 from the diet is a good thing. But I'm not sure about supplementing solely with fish oil. The body preferentially sequestrates omega-3 fatty acids, and after a while, it actually creates after a short while, it will actually create an omega-6 deficiency. Now, I know Joe McCullough talks about the dangers of omega-6, but he doesn't really often talk about the essentiality of omega-6. We need omega-6, very important for the skin. It's a vital thing, and the ratio of the cells below the neck is about 4 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. So huge fan of Joe McCullough and everything he stands for. However, when he talked about magnesium stearate being a problem, we got him to send an apology out for that, which he did. And also, I wonder about, he doesn't really talk about the essentiality of very good quality omega-6. We shouldn't have too much of anything by definition. I know he's very big and strong on that, but we need an adequate ratio of 4:1 for optimal cell membrane dynamics. And if you take fish off a longer period of time, you end up having a negative impact on cell membrane dynamics. And as Patricia Kane says, or is it Ed Kane said, life is at the cell membrane. So let's be careful of that. Minimal alcohol, but enjoy some alcohol. I found that actually, I don't know about you, but I'd love to have this conversation, maybe a sort of quiz, is that tequila, and I appreciate it's the Resposito, that entirely from cactus as opposed to from corn, has actually been found to support and reverse fatty liver on its own. So it's a very, very good thing to have medicinally speaking. Also, I'm not suggesting of too much alcohol, but I think tequila is a special type of alcohol. And certainly in my muscle testing, it seems that the spirits test up for virtually everyone as okay, but it's the beer and wine that doesn't. So beer and wine causes more problems. So tequila is a good alcohol for one's liver and can reverse fatty liver. So I understand, although I haven't got myself as an experiment. I don't drink very much, but I do drink tequila if ever I drink anything at all. And then we have intermittent fasting and caloric restriction. I read a study last week saying intermittent fasting increases the risk of death by heart disease, interestingly. So some controversy about that, or caloric restriction. So basically we need to be lean, but make sure we've got adequate nourishment. So there's those things to do. How many of us are doing all those things? Perhaps all of us listening into the SVHI because we're all of the like mind. Physical activity. Did you know muscle contraction mimics insulin and reduces the burden on the beta cells in the pancreas? So exercise. Now, if you exercise before a meal, I'm not talking about intensive and get sweaty and so on, but you do some sort of physical work of muscle like squats or going up and down the stairs, 10 times before a meal, you actually have a much better blood sugar regulation after the meal. True. A good night's sleep. If you have a poor sleep, the next day you have an elevated level of cortisol. And what does elevated cortisol do over time? It induces insulin resistance. And of course, cortisol raises blood sugar, which will automatically mean you want more insulin. Insulin is the most powerful pro-inflammatory hormone in the body. And so we don't want that. So sleep, hugely, daily mindfulness, but the Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now, he calls it daily mindlessness, as you might know. So not mindfulness. You want to empty your mind of thoughts, and it counteracts sympathetic tone. And then maintain your lean body weight. I love that when, especially in medical terms, it says, yes, and maintain your lean body weight. There we go. Simple as that. So if you're overweight, just simply lose weight. But of course, it's more complicated than that. And so there we go. At the end. So I speak quickly. I've got a foreign accent for you, most of you anyway, but I hope that wasn't too fast, but I hope you get the gist of it. So really, introduction to fatty pancreas, definitely associated with pancreatitis, definitely associated with fatty liver. And we've got 2 questions to answer only. You got away lightly. Normally I have a slightly longer quiz, but I'd love to hear your comments on that. Karen, do chip in, and Jerry and Paula and Jeff. Anyway, so what percentage of the pancreas is, the weight of it is devoted to the function of digestive enzyme production? And there's Christine as well. Hello, Christine Peterson. I remember speaking to you before. So answers you can maybe unmute or put it in the chat. And what percentage is devoted to making the hormones? Another question as well, which someone will remind me of. So thank you so much for being there, taking time out of what could be a day when you could be doing something completely different than tuning into this. So thanks for listening, everyone. I'm very happy to answer questions, whether it's on this subject or, dare I say it, on another subject, if you
We
wish.
do have a couple of answers for the pancreas. There's one that 10% towards making insulin, and I
Okay.
guess 3%. So I'm just guessing.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I have the answer, of course. So thank you so much for volunteering. A guess to both of you, if that's 2 of you. That's great. So we got, I guess the other percentage would be for the exocrine function. Mona's got a hand up, but it's actually 2% for insulin and glucagon. So unbelievably close. But then Susan is, she's bright. She's been in this field for a long time, and 98% is exocrine function. So hugely relevant. And bear in mind that it's hugely energetic organ, by taking digestive enzymes, they recycle. Did you know that the pancreatic enzymes recycle by 90 to 95%? So you're able to make enough for tomorrow. It takes a lot of energy to produce these things from proteins, effectively, amino acids, and so the body wants to conserve them. So enzymes they're used, but then the raw material gets recycled, and the pancreas can make enough for tomorrow. If you're busy, sympathetic on, and you've got too much oxidative stress or lack of energy, the pancreas suffers. It's one of the first organs that doesn't function properly. And then if you can't digest food properly, dysbiosis, maldigestion, food sensitivity, leaky gut, inflammation. Not good news. So pancreas, hugely important, and I find it extremely common for people to need pancreatic enzymes. But by taking the enzymes, you get to make more enzymes tomorrow, and it creates a virtuous cycle, not a vicious cycle. So it's not a negative feedback loop like hormones. It's a virtuous cycle, feed-forward cycle. Thank you.
Now, the second question of how long does it take to get rid of trans fat,
Oh yes,
fatty
that
acids?
was a question.
I suspect that you can't get rid of them because they incorporate in the cell walls, but we've got answers to 7
Oh,
years, 2 years, 51 days.
okay. Who said 51 days? Who said that? Can you
That
see?
goes to my Lintron.
Mylin Tran. Yeah, smart cookie, that one. I'm not saying the other guys were not super smart and gorgeous people, but no, and then by the way, Susan, we don't have cell walls, we have cell membranes. That's actually biology lesson. That's plants have cell walls, but that's okay. But cell membranes. So yes, the average person is about 51 days. So clearly we've read the same material and we believed it. So it must be true. So well done, that lady. For identifying that. Yes, I wish I had more. So Mona's got a hand up, so I don't know if she wants to ask a question
Okay,
or whether
first,
other questions in the chat.
Okay, first, before I get to Mona, I would like to say when you're talking about improving muscle mass, William Davis, who I put
Mm,
this presentation in the chat of
yeah,
Grain
wheat
Belly
belly.
Zone,
Yeah, grain
got
belly.
this
Wheat
program
belly.
where you can increase muscle mass, decrease visceral fat,
Mm,
and it includes xanthan. And you don't necessarily lose weight. You don't change your diet. And this program consists of the probiotic L-Reuteri,
yeah.
hyaluronic acid, collagen
Mm.
peptides, and astaxanthin. You can find it in his book, Gut Belly. He also has these monthly meetings that you can join and ask him anything
Is
you
it is it
want.
is he written? But I thought it was wheat belly. I thought
This
it
one's
was.
Gut Belly.
Okay, so he's just okay. Just
I
change the
put his
prefix. That's fantastic. Thank
SVI
you.
presentation in the chat
Great.
so you can look at it. But
Uh,
it's quite exciting to me that without
mm,
changing your diet and taking these
yes.
things, you can increase your muscle mass. Because when we get
Mm,
older, we lose it. Because
yeah.
he says every time we diet, we lose 21% of the
Yeah.
weight
Yeah.
loss is muscle
Yeah.
mass, which we don't get back.
Sarcopenia. That was it. And yeah, fully aware of that. Oh, I want to get that link.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
Yeah, I know. There are lots of chats, so I'm having to try and find it. But
Well, don't worry, I'll send it to you. But
yeah,
that's
so yeah,
very exciting.
I thank you. I know. I remember he was coming on, and it is exciting, isn't it? It means that we can do the least amount possible and get the maximum gains. Yes.
No changing our
Um.
diet. We can keep our
Yeah.
trans fatty acids and the donuts and the high
Yeah.
fructose corn syrup. Isn't that great?
I don't take responsibility for anything, but of course, maybe doing some training would be a good thing too. Who
Oh,
knows?
look at those guns.
Oh, guns.
Okay,
Okay. Going
Mana,
on.
what's your question?
Yeah,
And please
Mona.
put your hands up because I'll call you in the order you put your hands up. And if we have time, I'll get to anything that's put in the chat.
Thank you very much indeed for contributing.
Mona.
Well, Mona, go ahead.
Thanks. Just first, I wanted to mention that in case you're interested, Brian Peskin has
Oh,
done research.
yes.
Oh, you're familiar. Okay,
I
great.
love, yeah, he's got an
Yeah.
interesting, he's an interesting character, and I can see how people may not take to him because of the way he speaks. But I have to say, I listen to the message, not necessarily the messenger. I've listened to many of his podcasts. I mean, for ages. Very, very interesting, very strong character, and a good scientist. So thank you, Mona, for mentioning Brian Peskin. Well worth having a watch. Lots on YouTube, and I've listened to him for many years. Thank you so much for raising that.
Thanks. The two other things I wanted to mention are um, I wanted to ask you about the role of choline
Yeah.
deficiency. And also, one other question I've been reading Morley Robbins' research into the importance of copper in preventing iron dysregulation.
Yes,
And
I gave my webinar on copper and iron 2 weeks ago after spending 100 hours researching the area over the last year or so because my stepfather was killed by too much iron. He was 89. He's called Peter, my stepfather for 44 years. and he had an unknown thing go on. He had low hemoglobin, needed transfusion. So transfusion, he had a hemoglobin of 54, should be 110. So he needed the transfusion, great. But then they gave him more iron, more iron, more iron. I was writing to his GP, and my stepfather, really appreciated me, really respected me. But he was of the age of the where he say, I'm not going to do what the doctor says. So he did what the doctor says. So he starts with 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams, up to 900 milligrams of ferrous sulfate a day. And I wrote to the doctor and said, this is just crazy. He's just going to store it. He's not going to be able to use it properly. And hepcidin levels will go up, and then preventing him absorbing the iron, and so on and so on. So I dug in, and I've followed Molly Robbins's work. So thank you so much. Mona, you and I are reading the same material. And I've studied it intensively. And I gave actually a presentation, which I would say is possibly the best webinar I've ever presented in terms of impact on humanity, because iron storage affects every single person. You may be aware of Jim Wong's book called Iron, the Most Toxic Metal as well. You may be aware of that one. And
No,
Eugene Weinberg was the professor who'd been studying this work for ages. He wrote the foreword for that book, which was published in 2007 or 8, I think. And also Barbara Crawford, The Iron Elephant. I had that book since 1992. It's still on my shelf. In fact, stay there, folks. Don't go anywhere. For a moment there, you all thought the books on my shelf were unread. Well, these 3 have been read. Check it out. Barbara Crawford. There you go. See, old photograph. Barbara Crawford, The Iron Elephant. I've done many clear outs. I've moved house. I've been divorced, remarried, shut books out, but I kept this book for whatever reason. The dangers, and this is about hemochromatosis and iron storage. And then you've got this one, Iron, the Most Toxic Metal. Jim Wong, the forward by Eugene Weinberg, brilliant guy talking about that. And then, of course, Molly Robbins, Cure, well leafed through. And what I've done is I've looked at all the references that I could that Molly Robbins was referring to. So not really quoting Molly Robbins, but using the work that he referred to, reading all the papers and getting to grips with hepcidin, hephaestin, ferroportin, and ceruloplasmin. So I'm actually fluent in it now. It's another language. I know we've got lots of the languages on here today, but I'm actually now fluent in it. But it took a long time, and I prepared a webinar which I gave to Nutrilink, and it's which is the company I co-founded, an education company in the UK. I have to say I'm almost most excited about it. It affects redox balance in the human body and is hugely relevant. So huge credit to Molly Robbins for highlighting that for me.
Sorry,
Yeah.
quick question.
Yeah.
Is that webinar that you gave on that topic accessible to us somehow?
Yes, I'm going to give Susan the link. See, now the thing is, in the UK, same as the US, it's the same sort of ethics and rules. If you give a webinar, you can't then have a product that you sell associated with it. So it's education. So for CPD and so on, you give it's sort of generic forms. And so because the webinars I'm referring to often refer to a nutrient or supplement or 2 or 3 or 4, not usually at the end, and it's not a big deal, not a big part of the webinar, we're not able to put them as an archive on a product to go and buy. And so what I will do is I will give Susan the link to info@nutrilink.co.uk, which is basically, and I'll warn them in the office to say that there might be an interested person for that webinar. I have to say, I prepared a glossary. I prepared extra slides and 80 slides in the slide deck, which explains and goes through the whole thing. But the slides are one thing, and I'm actually talking through it, and I believe it's a pretty good comprehensive view of copper. I was actually called, I know it might be a different expression in America, so excuse me the wrong language, but I was called copper knob at school. I think that's got to do with my head rather than anything else, and or Duracell, because I had auburn hair. So as it happens, copper and me go way back. Secondly, in my exam in 1992, I was asked to write down the 4 or more functions of copper, and I hadn't revised that. So it's sort of stuck in my craw, if that's the expression. I didn't know all the answers about copper then. And so I got to learn about copper then because I failed to know the answer in the exam. And and also I studied general classics. In general classics, so I studied Latin and Greek, and my brother taught Latin and Greek for 30 years. He's just retired. So there you go. It's a sort of typical sort of English scenario. And Hephaestus was the armorer to the gods, and he built Achilles' armor for the Battle of Troy. You know, that kind of guy, Achilles. So, and he was on the Greek side. So Hephaestus, so hephaestin is the name of one of the ferroportin enzymes that actually converts the insoluble ferrous sulfate to ferric form, which can be then transported by transfer in the bloodstream. So ceruloplasmin and hephaestin. So sort of connection with general classics, copper in my life, and then my stepfather getting killed by too much iron. I had a heart attack on the stairs. Wasn't much fun. He would have died of something soon, but I think he might have had another 6 months of better living and died quietly rather unpleasantly on the stairs because of
When
the
would you
massive.
like to make that presentation on iron and copper to us?
Yes,
Because I think
I
this
think
is
what we could do.
hugely important.
I think Mona, maybe forget the link with Nutrilink. I think that we will get me on, if you're interested. But to me it's
You
relevant.
name the 2 hours and we'll do it.
It's complicated, but I think with all the information, I think you sort of listen to it once, read through again, get to grips with it. Again, it's been hours and hours. I've read so many papers. I've read these books and more. And what's fascinating, I mean, it's just fascinating. Hemochromatosis, the single most common inherited disorder on planet Earth that affects our health. And it's not just having the heterozygous, the two types of genes from both parents, even the homozygous. That means that 40% of those, 40 to 70% of people with the homozygous, one of those genes that encourages iron storage can still lead to iron storage, which is a rusting factor and is negative to health big time. And it's estimated by Jim Moon, not Wong, sorry, Jim Moon, in that book, that iron is the most toxic metal, that in fact iron causes more problems than the mercury, lead, aluminium, cadmium, nickel, etc., combined by far. So iron, seriously bad news. So thank you, Mona. I'm glad you've read that information. It is fascinating, but I've got a PhD client who's now near his 70s, retired, and he lives, strangely, if you know where these islands are, in the outer Shetland Islands, which is the northwest of Scotland. But he was traveling all around England all the time teaching hematologists. He's a PhD hematologist, and so I called him up last year about this information, and he said that he was sort of aware of the information, but even with the PhD that he got many years ago, that effectively this is unknown in medical territory. It's unknown in undergraduate nutrition, and it's certainly not taught in postgraduate nutrition either. And that's where Molly Robbins has done a good job. I know that Joe McCullough's interviewed Molly Robbins a few times as well. I've listened to those. I've read what I can, and I've actually finally got to grips with it. So it's really fascinating. Maybe there is not such a thing as iron deficiency anemia. Maybe it is actually iron dysregulation anemia. And I now understand what the enzymes and hormones do. And hepcidin was discovered in 2000. Hephaestin and ferroportin were discovered in 1999, and ceruloplasmin, I think, in 1948. So ceruloplasmin has been known for a long time, but if you've had anyone who's studied before then, and those three things are not incorporated in nutrition education or medical education since the year 2000 anyway. So it's how are they possibly going to know? So copper, hugely important. We also have the ability to clear copper. We don't have the ability to clear iron unless we're bleeding. So there we go. I know I speak very fast, but I hope you got the gist of that. So
You
thank you for
name the
listening.
2 hours and we'll have you on. You pick.
Oh, and sorry, Ellen's there as well. I'm going to say hello to Ellen. I've just seen Ellen's name. Yes, I'll pick the two names. So, yeah, I will for sure. It's fascinating. It's also a huge amount of time condensed into understanding, and hopefully I can convey the information. And again, I put lots of information on the slides, and I looked at all the reference papers and not just simply quoting the brilliant Morley. I think he's brilliant and good for him.
Great, thank you. Can I also just bring up again the question about choline? Because
choline deficiency has been known for a long time. Patrick Hov has been banging that desk and about its impact on cognitive function. Because we're not eating eggs. An egg yolk may be the best source of choline, but choline I think it's the most recent essential nutrient discovered. I think that's a phenomenon, 1990s. I think that, Mona, can you back that up? But choline.
Well, the thing that interests me is that I think making people deficient of just choline induces fatty liver.
Yes, and fatty liver. So phosphatidylcholine is a supplement I've used an awful lot to help to counteract that. So yes, lack of choline. So choline and inositol can exist in supplements together, sort of lipotropic nutrients they're referred to. And I use phosphatidylcholine or choline and inositol to help that. You're absolutely right. So and many people are low in choline, and it is a key nutrient. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Thank you. Yeah, Mona's on the ball.
Okay, anything more, Mona? So now we're going to Ellen Marie's question. What are your thoughts on the current trend of castor oil packs for the liver?
Current trend. Yeah, well, good old Edgar Casey, amazing insights that he had. We have castor oil packing in our house. My best friend Karen, who's a nutritionist and works with Nutrilink, she recommends castor oil packing. I didn't know it was a recent thing. I think it's been around for decades, but I didn't know there was a current way. But thank you, Ellen, for highlighting that. I believe it can be very, very useful indeed. Yes, it's a little bit messy. You've got to get the right material, and some of these materials can actually the material can be actually quite costly to get. And you can possibly make your own, but I believe very, very useful support for moving the liver physically, which you couldn't necessarily do with supplements. So I think it could be a very useful thing.
Well, Dr. Telleran, who has been on our program recently, says that castor oil, it might be rancid or,
Yeah. So
overoxidated.
so
So
of
is that
course
an issue?
yeah, any rancid oil is an issue. It's probably less of an issue when you're using it topically, I'd probably say. But I believe, of course, you want to get castor oil that's in a dark bottle that's been maybe vacuum packed and has really basically been fresh. So yes, you have to get the right source of castor oil. Yes.
And it's got to be in glass.
Yeah, glass and dark glass, and yeah, for sure. And I use one of those the wine bottles top. I don't drink wine myself, and then you pump the air out, and so you've got the little air between the top of the bottle and the oil as you use the oil up.
Okay, then we've got a question from Karen Allen. What do you think of Zach Bush's product? She thinks it's called Ion, but it was originally called Restore for addressing the leaky gut. Yeah, I
Oh
saw those
yeah,
folks
I'm
last
I'm a
year
fa-
at the
I'm
interpersonal medicine thing.
Yeah, I'm from what I've seen of Zach Bush, I think he's a great guy, and I think hats off to him. And he's outspoken and he speaks his truth, and he appears to be extremely authentic. And so just I think by from what I've sat, I think there's always a side of someone we never know, but from what I've seen, I believe it's really good stuff. And I have to say, I believe I've looked at that product. Otherwise, I'm not so familiar with it. I'd have to have a look before I could give you my opinion. I'm sorry, so many products out there, but I think, as I said, there are many, many, many different routes to help heal the gut lining. There really are.
We have a question on where does William Davis have his monthly meetings? If you go to his website, he's got his inner circle. I think it's $176 a year. I'm told that he's got monthly meetings and people get all their questions addressed because I'm trying to
Mm,
figure out how to do his protocol and I'm not finding it. But if I'm moving
okay.
to England, I'm not sure the times will work out. So
Got you.
anyway,
Yeah, that's an
um,
idea. Maybe yeah, I'm thinking maybe I could have a monthly meeting with subscription and beautiful people on there as well. Who knows? The
I'd love it.
carry on, Susan.
Okay, then somebody recommends checking out Theo Lucier's Biocharge, which has fulvic and humic acid, similar to Zach Bush's.
Yeah, I've been a fan of humic acid for years. It also has an antiviral effect. Um, and I guess it's a micro slice of Mother Earth as well. So it's basically ancient compost, and the nanoparticles very useful for binding onto toxins. Fulvic acid also supports use of nutrients. So again, like I said, there are many, many, many different ways of helping the gut lining and helping restore the gut and overall health. So yeah, I must admit, I'm sorry I don't know all these products, although I'm familiar with hundreds and hundreds of products. I'd have to refresh by looking at it, I could probably give a good idea, but certainly humic acid, fulvic acid, yeah, thumbs up to those.
Okay, here's a question. There's been, what about hydrogen water? I've seen these
Yes.
tablets,
Yep.
found them in England and
Yeah.
here, where you put it
I,
in water and you get hydrogen water. Do you
yeah.
still need to take other nutrient supplements such as an antioxidant? This question has.
Yeah, I think that because the hydrogen, it's come to the fore over the last 2 or 3 years. I know Allergy Research have a hydrogen product, although we haven't imported it to the UK. And one of the reasons is we looked at the market and it requires a lot of education and understanding as to why would I use that? And you've got bottles that generate the hydrogen ions, and you've got tablets as well. And it's certainly something that I've looked at, but it sort of it almost like hasn't come to our shores, although I've been very aware of the hydrogen story. And I do believe it has a very powerful antioxidant effect. And the more antioxidant effects you get from that, the less you'll need from other sources. I think that's a straightforward thing to say.
Okay, well, and then one person points out Beam Minerals has an excellent quality of humic and fulvic acid. So Beam Minerals has these large
Mm.
bottles, plastic bottles. You can get this in. I hope we've got more questions because we've got a genius here. He also probably can address individual questions. He's very good at
Yeah,
that.
you
So
can ask
please either
a
raise your
question.
hand. Good, Mona. She's back on the floor.
Well,
Okay,
I
please
didn't want
raise
to
your
hog if
hand.
anybody else has other
No,
questions,
well,
but
No,
I've got
please.
so
plenty.
I think you're breaking the ice, Mona. But if you ask the question, other people are like, oh, I can ask a question too. So thank you, Mona.
Thank you. In terms of iron regulation, what do you think of methionine blue?
Yeah, methylene blue.
Sorry, yes,
Yeah, no,
methylene
I
blue.
know. You're
Sorry,
just testing. It was a nice little
cross my
test.
wires.
Yeah, methylene blue. I've actually got 3 different types on my shelf. The methylene blue, it influences the monoamine oxidase enzymes and therefore can help to regulate levels of the neurotransmitters involved in with those enzymes. So it's dopamine, noradrenaline um, levels in the brain, and some individuals have an MAO SNP, so single nucleotide polymorphism, where it could be too fast or too slow. But methylene blue can be very useful. I know Joe McCullough rates that too. I have muscle tested quite a few people with it, and I was really hopeful that it would be like, yeah, no, 9 out of 10 people need it, but I haven't found that to be the case yet. And I haven't wanted people to start to try this interesting food dye, which has an important role to play. So I think it definitely has a place. I think rather like other things that are sort of hit our consciousness, I would say straight off that astaxanthin probably will benefit more people than methylene blue,
Let's
but I haven't used methylene blue in 100 people compared to another 100 people. I know I haven't got the experience with it. I've read all the books I could on it. I've listened to podcasts on it. I've got 3 different types of product. I've muscle tested people with it, but I don't test up for it but myself,
that
so I'm not going to take it.
It
that's really
also
interesting.
helps with the electron transport chain, I'm told.
Yeah,
Right. And
ETC.
also, the reason I was asking about it is because it reduces the ferric form of iron to ferrous iron, right? So
Ooh.
the non-oxygen carrying.
Yeah, but we
Um,
want ferric, not ferrous. Ferrous is the insoluble form, which is the toxic form. Ferric is the good form. Maybe you're thinking the other way around.
Sorry, the other way, I guess.
Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
reduces the toxic form to the iron carrying
Yes, which is
form.
actually
Yeah.
what hephaestin and ceruloplasmin do too. So it actually may
Right.
well preserve ceruloplasmin on that level alone. But again, when I've muscle tested it,
Yeah,
you know, it
that's
just
really
it
interesting.
just just it hasn't, and that's why I think muscle testing is so useful, because we get this sort of new, like even with humic acid, fulvic acid, when they hit the scene. Although they've been talked about for 20 years plus, it is intriguing to say, well, oh, you try this. This is the next thing. Not sliced bread, of course, but it's brilliant. And then I just found that again, astaxanthin tests up a lot for a lot of people, but the methylene blue doesn't. So I'm not saying they've served the same function, but I'm just saying that things that come across our bows. But I've got more to learn about methylene blue, and I said I've got 3 different types here that I actually use for muscle testing purposes. And
Okay.
also I know the dose is key, perhaps with methylene blue, perhaps more than other things. So the dose needs to be just so.
We have a question of a listener who uses copper topically daily. What advice do you have about overuse?
Overuse, copper bracelet. Copper helps with arthritis. Why does copper help with arthritis? I put this on since I learned about copper about 18 months ago, and trace levels get across, and it helps with superoxide dismutase. It helps with elastin, and it basically also helps to maintain levels of copper. If you use it topically every day, it can accumulate, but your body has a means of eliminating it via bile. But I would say, you can definitely have too much of a good thing. There's probably a bell-shaped curve where you don't have enough, and lots of people don't have enough. And what's interesting is Morley Robbins highlights, and for those of you who've read the book The Cure, you now know that according to his studies, that the typical soil levels have gone down 50 times, whereas the levels of iron have not gone down 50 times. So you've got a relatively even lower level of copper compared to iron, for example, and that ratio is important. And therefore, people may need more copper than we've needed before. And there are a number of negatives as well, such as vitamin ascorbic acid with food can actually diminish the level of copper. Of course, taking zinc supplements, which everyone's done for COVID protection immunity, you actually can lower copper. Too much manganese can lower copper. And then you've got the citrate form, which fascinating. I found the study from 1960s that Morley Robbins referred to. Maybe you've remembered this, but the citrate molecule actually has an effect in the serum of inhibiting ceruloplasmin. So again, the citrate form. So I've actually created a magnesium form without the citrate specifically for that. So I've got malate, glycinate, and taurate in one particular form to avoid the magnesium citrate. So and vitamin D has an impact on hepcidin. Hepcidin is the protein that was discovered in the year 2000 that is made in the liver, and it basically binds to ferroportin and breaks it down, and therefore stops the transport of iron from the gut into the body. But it doesn't mean to say that the iron will not accumulate in the enterocytes, the gut lining itself. So vitamin D increases iron storage in the gut. Not a good thing. So it's interesting. So his comments on vitamin D, watch out vitamin D, watch out vitamin C. Now magnesium ascorbate, vitamin C away from food is no problem as far as I know. Or magnesium ascorbates away from food. But so again, things get a bit complicated, but there's a reason for everything and there's a balance for everything. And I think certainly copper is underrated. And I spoke to Karen Watkins, who runs Mineral Check in the UK at the weekend. It was a pure coincidence. I haven't spoken to her for ages, and she reported that the vast majority of hair mineral analysis, which I don't really use much anymore at all, and I think it's too much implication really, but she says the vast majority of people are low in copper. And that may be a much cheaper way of assessing your level of copper, because ceruloplasmin is 45 pounds plus the blood draw, plus the effort of getting the blood done in the first place. So ceruloplasmin is not a test that everyone will get done, but it is a very good marker for copper. I have a few clients getting it done, but it's just difficult to access and it costs quite a lot in itself. So I think hair mineral analysis would be good. So I think every day transdermally, I would say there's got to be a way of checking out. So either check your ceruloplasmin will be my thought, and or do a hair mineral analysis to answer that question finally, if you're taking transdermal copper every day.
Now, people can always make an appointment with Anthony and get their individual situation assessed as to exactly how you're doing and what he recommends. He's superb at that. And,
That's like, yeah.
we will make sure his information goes in the chat. Why don't you can put that in
Yeah,
the
I'll put my email in there now. I'll give you my email to email.
chat.
So let me put that in the chat. So do contact me. I know
I mean,
Eleanor.
you can see he's superb knowledge, but also he's extremely good at getting the individual needs through his muscle testing. I mean, he doesn't follow the the
Protocols.
proclamations, you've got to take this or that. He does it individually.
And no, I've got conformational bias and copper, but the muscle testing will take that out of the situation. So not everybody needs copper. Maybe more people need magnesium. Now, magnesium and copper, again, the relationship. Magnesium is a brilliant antioxidant, and if you got depleted magnesium, you're distressed. You end up depleting ceruloplasmin afterwards. So again, connections between things. Big fan of magnesium, but it's interesting that about 50% of people can't use magnesium properly because they've got low levels of antioxidants such as glutathione. You need adequate glutathione in order for magnesium to get back in the cell. And see, it gets complicated. I can see. So Marlin, who had this 51%, I think Marlin Tran, I have to assume she's correct in everything she says now. What are your initial ideas to think about when a person has the trifecta of high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol? Well, I guess that's part of the metabolic syndrome. Is the high blood pressure consistent over 24-hour cycle, or is it high in certain times of the day? So do they have a relaxation in the vasculature or the arteries? Diabetes and high blood pressure, but basically it's an insulin resistant thing, and I'd be wanting to rule out the high cortisol situation first, because cortisol is the driver for insulin resistance, and also it raises glucocorticoid that raises both blood pressure and cholesterol. But equally, hypothyroidism, which is also induced by high cortisol, because cortisol inhibits the conversion of T4 to T3, and therefore I would look at cortisol and thyroid and assume insulin resistance. So I hope that makes sense, Mylin.
Anthony, do you want me to bring you tablets for the hydrogen water?
You can, yeah, we can meet at IPM. I haven't got any, so yeah, we can actually do some testing with that. That'd be great.
Oh, we can have a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, Mona's back
Let's
on.
see. We've got a question from Karen. What symptoms would we see with iron overload? Would there always be noticeable symptoms? I suspect not, and it's highly inflammatory.
Yeah, it is. It's the internal rusting factor. Well, it's a very good question. Certainly with hemochromatosis, you've got images of sort of like a jaundiced yellow man, or like, yeah, almost like copper man, but it's more like it's sort of rusty man, and it affects testicles, fertility, brain, pancreas, liver, accumulates in spleen as well. And obviously, spleen breaks down red blood cells too. So I think you can fatigue. I think fatigue would probably be the first one. And you can end up with iron deficiency anemia and yet have too much iron storage. So you need to look at transferrin and total iron binding capacity as well. So there are lots of hematological markers, and it's really, without having a list in front of us, it's really unfair of me to start rabbiting away with acronyms for RDW, MCV, MCHC, platelets, iron, RBCs, transferrin, TIBC, or UIBC. Unless you're not familiar with them, it actually requires. I mean, it's an 8-hour coaching process for practitioners, generally speaking, but certainly I can give a summary of it, which I will do at an SVHI radio show soon.
Soon. Okay. What's your comment on this new ingredient, Slender Core?
What is that?
Well, I guess that's the answer.
I don't know
Okay.
what Sendacor is. Sendacor obviously is a trade name for, but I don't know what it is. So do tell me what it is. And I hope it's not something like a Zempic.
Oh, no, the GLP-1,
Oh
no.
yeah. Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
GLP-1. Yeah.
it
It is
paralyzes the stomach, the
Oh, you
anticholinergic, it's messed up. It wrinkles the
it's
skin. That's enough reason for us women to stay away from it.
okay. You and she's going to say something. Sorry.
yeah. So it is a horseradish tree extract, turmeric extract, and also I believe it's curry leaf extract.
Okay, it's an interesting mix. I had horseradish for lunch today. It's one of my favorite flavors. So horseradish is actually good for metabolism and fat burning, as far as I know. So that makes sense. It would be in there. Otherwise, I have to say I'd have to refamiliarize myself or familiarize myself for the first time because curry extract again, you got is it cayenne, and cayenne's very good for circulation, etc. And that may help metabolism. I know cayenne's been used as a sort of metabolism booster along with horseradish. And the other one I didn't quite catch. So again, it like all these things, it'll be very good for some people. It sounds useful. Again, they'd have to be the right active ingredients, the right amount. The dose is everything. Now, the dose is everything was quoted by Paracelsus, who was a Swiss physician, but he was really referring to toxicity rather than essentiality or nutrient need. But dose is everything. I think he must have said it in French or German, and that's an interesting thing. So the dose is key, I would say, and otherwise, again, it could be something that supports metabolism. But what if there's too much inflammation? What if there's iron storage? So it's a question of, is that appropriate for someone, and is that a priority process to engage with someone? And is that something, I want to lose weight, take this pill to lose weight? Well, actually, maybe you need thyroid support. Maybe you need to reduce and help the gut microbiota to reduce LPS. You may need to, so it's a question of what's the point of entry. And what I aim to do in my professional capacity is to identify the key priorities for people, to identify what is the best bang for your buck, what's the best thing to do to get the resources. Because you could have 101 supplements that are good for you, but I only want to recommend things that are imperative for what your needs are to correct the underlying causes. And then by hitting the sort of the bullseye, if I use that analogy, it benefits everything else, as opposed to simply targeting that there. So again, that could be interesting to see. Again, it would take quite a long time for me to assess, let's say in this small audience, to see whether that supplement was a priority for anybody. It may not be. So there we go. I can see questions here.
Well, Yunchi,
Popping up.
you've got other questions. Why don't you ask them now
Yeah.
that you're on the floor?
Oh, thank you. So a part of the Slandercore is a increase basal metabolism.
Yes, understand.
So increase the burning of blood glucose within the muscle. It also shrinks the size of fat cell generation and size.
Great. That's great.
So would that be considered something that's really helpful for somebody who wants to manage their blood sugar as well as losing weight and getting rid of excess fat?
Yes, it could be, but again, I'm sort of, there's a caveat saying, well, yes, but it depends, because it may be 10 on the list, it may be 20 on the list, it may be number 3 on the list of things that people actually need. And so I'll be looking at, so I'm not looking at what the function of the supplement does, but I'm looking for what functions does a person need support for in order to recommend a supplement to them. So really, I'm not decrying that particular supplement. It looks great because it's, very natural. It's got 3 mixes of traditional use. Sounds like Indian, Chinese, and a variety of other different sources that have been used for thousands of years, possibly. So yes, it would make sense. But again, it's a sort of a generic pill for a generic condition. It's not necessarily addressing individual needs for someone. So again, I'd be really curious to know if that would ever come up as a priority for people. It could well do. And maybe, 50% of overweight people could benefit from that, and it really hits the nail on the head. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Because maybe we need to address the insulin resistance, the thyroid imbalance, and so on, and the gut microbiota and so on. There's so many different things. So it could be that by raising metabolic rate, I'm not saying it'd be negative, but I can see there might be a challenge. So let's just say it does that. So you improve energy use, and then it is potentially possible that that could benefit in the short term, but may not help adrenals, and it may not help thyroid balance potentially, although by helping blood sugar balance it should do. So the answer is yeah, thanks for that. Oh, ginger, yeah, ginger's great. There's some information there. So again, it sounds well thought through, but again, I have to say it's like if I can mention one brand, and I'm not going to really be praising it, Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is now worth $1 billion, and it's a brilliant marketing campaign. It seems everybody's Athletic Greens. When I've muscle tested, I've tested 2 out of 10 people test well from it, 8 out of 10 test poorly for it. And of course, the Chinese model of being damp, maybe it's a damp food and people need, need more fire in their gut. So athletic greens is promoted as good for everyone, but name a supplement, name anything that's good for everyone. It'd be just like unbelievable. And I reckon that there's a certain probiotic like Saccharomyces boulardii or Lacto-GG, which may be good for 50% of people, which is amazing. And even if something was good for 20% of the population, that would still be amazing. And so this notion that one thing is going to be good for, again, you've got the Chinese market, you've got overweight people, lean people, you've got different genetic dispositions, but different environments, different, etc. So this notion that anything's going to be good for everyone. I'm a big fan of cayenne, so thank you very much indeed for Mona for indicating that. Yes, the transient receptor potentiation channels. Yes, cayenne. I'm a huge fan of cayenne, and I've read the book by the cardiologist that recommends cayenne for heart disease and heart attacks and so on prevention. So I think these things are very useful. Anti-inflammatory. So we talk about vitamin D. Guess what? 50% of people who take vitamin D can't use it because they don't have enough magnesium. Magnesium can't be got back in the cell, so, and also the wrong form, and so even magnesium is not appropriate for everyone. Even vitamin D isn't appropriate for everyone, and what about vitamin C isn't even appropriate for everyone, and so on and so on and so on. So it's just, and what about the balance? And people say, well, what about a multivitamin? And multivitamins have been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, and the study came out last week, and I know that, but not everybody needs to take iron in a multi, if iron's in the multi, but they need more copper. So the answer is it's a balance, and everyone is unique and everyone is different. There might be some trends, and again, your experience, Yun-Shi, I don't know what your practice is, but it's fascinating. I'd love to have the conversation with the sort of the Chinese language, the Indian Ayurvedic methods of sort of Western nutritional biochemistry, but then hopefully with kinesiology, for example, you can test what's good for someone and their wisdom will speak out rather than me having to know everything, for example. Thanks for listening fast. I'm
And
looking at the
you
questions as
also
well.
had a question about which kind of magnesium is good for sleep.
Yeah, see, magnesium, there are so many different kinds. And what is your opinion in terms of promoting sleep? Because with blood sugar management, I noticed when I couldn't sleep, I definitely, my blood sugars went out the window.
Yeah, blood sugar imbalance. And I was talking to the Institute for Optimal Nutrition students that I was talking to on Saturday, and I found that there's a B vitamin complex that works brilliantly for stabilizing blood sugar. It's because low blood sugar is one of the biggest causes for people not sleeping properly. Not high blood sugar. High cortisol, of course, could be a reflection of low blood sugar. High cortisol could be a problem, but low blood sugar, for lots of people who tried all those calming agents, the Melissa, the passion flower, and so on, and the GABA supporters, etc., magnesium, and that hasn't worked. They tried everything. So, well, guess what? It's a low blood sugar that's the issue. And actually, this is where the CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors, can be very useful. So actually, look, I'm having a dip in blood sugar. And actually, Bio3BG is a B complex from Biotics Research. Bio3BG is brilliant for those with a low blood sugar. I'm putting it in the chat. Bio3BG from Biotics Research. It's a low dose active B vitamin formula. So it really is low dose. And I recommend 1, 2, or 3 at dinner, maybe 1 at bedtime. And it has basically solved all of those people who tried all those calming agents to help their sleep. And then tip Bio3BG, it stabilizes blood sugar, and then they sleep well. So that's for that. Now for magnesium 3 and 8, and it's I look to incorporate the magnesium 3 and 8 in this magnesium formula I put together recently. And the company says you've got to use 1,200 milligrams per dose, otherwise you can't use it. And we're going to charge you, by the way, a fortune. So whatever they've done, I didn't think you could patent an actual molecule, but they've actually patented that particular form of magnesium. And it's quite expensive. It's the form that crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it has an affinity for brain function. It may well be useful for sleep, but I've used magnesium for a long period of time. So I think that magnesium taurate can help. Magnesium malate probably wouldn't be the form I would use because it helps with sort of uplifting energy, generally speaking. But I think probably a combination. The citrate doesn't necessarily work so well, but I think glycinate, and I'm a big fan of glycine, and taking glycine before bed can be also very useful because it also tempers glutamate levels. So magnesium glycinate, magnesium taurate, those forms are probably that I would use before sleep. But Yun-Shi, I'm gonna quiz you here. I need you to give me the answers to this question. Are you ready? And everybody else, whoever's here, and I can't tell how many people are still on because I'm not looking at that. Yun-Shi, so it's called the Starter for 10. This is University Challenge Test. Which mineral is the major sleep modulator mineral for the human being, and possibly all mammals and creatures on planet Earth? Which mineral, not just humans, which mineral is the major sleep modulator? I notice you're looking with your eyes top left, so you're looking into your archive of memory as opposed to making something up, which means you'd be looking to the top right. So that's the eye signs. That's criminology for you. So which mineral? You have to answer the question. Otherwise, we've installed an ejector chair under your chair, unbeknownst to you, and it will eject you out of your chair if you get the answer wrong. Ha
I
ha.
thought it's magnesium.
No, 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 no. Okay, so you were that wasn't really the answer, was it? You're thinking out loud. You can give me one answer only, and let's just say it's not magnesium. Otherwise, so you have to give. You said calcium. Okay. Hang on. The button's not working. We haven't been able to eject you from your chair. So no. So now somebody else, not you.
Melatonin?
No, Susan, I said
That's not a
mineral.
mineral, sorry.
So yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So Susan's the ejector chair. She doesn't get one because she's the boss. So somebody else needs to put their hand up. Um, Oh, interesting. Mona's got great information. Mona, you are doing some really black mold toxicity and citric acid metabolic. Yes, very interesting. Keith, thank you so much for playing the game. Keith says potassium. Now, potassium helps with magnesium, very useful thing, but no, incorrect. And you're going to have one guess each. So, Keith, thank you so much for participating. Who else is going to risk not the wrath of my tongue? I'm not speaking with forked tongue, but it is interesting. It's interesting. We don't know. We don't
So
know. It's not magnesium and it's not potassium, but Yun Shi is having another go, but I said don't have another go because you can't. It's naughty, naughty, one choice each.
Is it
Mona,
zinc?
apigenin is associated with sleep, but it's not a mineral, Mona. Although generally, yeah. Karen, sorry, Karen, go ahead.
Is it zinc? Zinc?
Yeah, yes. Karen is correct. She gets a little virtual star coming her way now. I hope you feel good for the next couple of days on that one. So zinc is the master modulator. It's not just through its actions through enzymes. It's actually a vital signaling agent within the nervous system, the central nervous system. So well done, Karen. Allen, a frequent flyer with SVHI, and it shows. And clearly, yes, it sounded like she was asking a question, like is it zinc? Like she was guessing wildly, but in fact she probably knew and she's just being modest. But yeah, zinc. So think zinc. So it's interesting. I thought magnesium was by far and away the most important mineral, just like you and she and everybody else. And of course, it works with potassium. It's very good for cramps, etc., etc. But zinc is the thing. So what's interesting with the zinc is it seems that the timing of when you take it. So you need to take it before bed. So it's not just the amount around; it's the amount that you've just eaten. So dietary zinc. A zinc-rich dinner, and or taking a zinc supplement in the evening or nighttime is what counts, not how much zinc you're taking in the day. So there you go.
There's a question on what magnesium pills I'm taking. This is something called Rejuvenation. I've also seen another brand. Anthony, I'm going to bring you this.
Yeah, bring me
Plus
that.
anything else you want. We can get whatever you want.
Bring me the swag bag and yeah.
Well, I don't have that many, but I'll connect you with Beverly Rubrick, who's connected with it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And yeah, Mona's, I'm listening to them. I'm going to read Mona's post. This is really interesting. That's why when I eat zinc heavy metals at night, or zinc heavy meals at night, I have pleasant dreams that I remember. Don't remember my dreams otherwise. Now, that's interesting. So which vitamin is most important? Not Mona, but Yun Shi can answer this. Which vitamin is particularly important? If you wanted to have more vivid dreams or dream more, which vitamin would you consume more of? I appreciate Mona has experience with zinc, and there may be a reason for this because it works hand in hand with this vitamin. But there was one vitamin in particular, but certainly thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Mona's got it. It's in the chat. It's B6, correct. Vitamin B6 is the dream recall nutrient. And on my questionnaire that I have, if you don't remember your dreams, some people don't care. I think it's important to remember your dreams. And there are a number of authors and famous folk that actually every morning write down their journals. And so who is the author of Brighton Rock, that famous English novel? It'll come to me. Brighton Rock, we can look it up online, someone tell me, but he wrote down his dreams every single day. Now, as it happens, his wife was one of my first clients and she was going blind, so I only saw her on the phone. Brighton Rock, who's got the answer to that one? Because of the pylori, Graham Greene, thank you so much. Brilliant. Who is this person? This just like knows everything. So encyclopedia. So it's not the pylori connection specifically. No, don't believe it's that. But pyroluria is actually more common than we know. And it's obviously the KP studies, the cryptopyrus, but also there's a different type of test. I think it's HPs that Klinghardt talks about. And there's a test from the Netherlands for looking at that. Yeah, she looked it up, but she's smart and also like really. So Graham Greene. So I met Graham Greene's wife as a client, and she was going blind with glaucoma. Anyway, talking about that. But she told me all about her husband, and every morning he'd write down his dreams, and then from his dreams came his books. So anyway, just that little ditty, that one. But B6 hugely important, and yeah, pyroluria is more common than we think, and pyroluria binds to aldehydes, and zinc and B6 are aldehydes, and actually makes you deficient to them, and that can lead to all kinds of problems and neurological and mental health disorders as well. Karen's got a hand up. Go ahead, Karen, unmute. If I can be as bold. There you are. You unmute, please.
Hi, thanks. So I have a question that may seem a little unusual, but I know that you do intuitive diagnosis. And
yeah,
I'm
don't diagnose
wondering-
anything. Intuitive assessment. Just be careful.
Assessment. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Yep. You're not a doctor, not a medical doctor, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
no diagnosis allowed. So I'm wondering what you think of the idea of people intuiting what they need to eat
Yeah.
and how people might increase their ability to do that. Years ago,
Yeah.
I knew a holistic doctor that said if you eat a clean diet, especially avoiding sugar, that you will be able to have a better sense of what you need. Your body will tell you.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, I've met many people who tell me on the one hand that, oh yeah, I really feel that's good for me, and they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about whatsoever. They're just going to say, especially if they've got a craving for something and they eat it and they feel better. It's like, well, I've got these addictions and it makes me feel good to eat these things. So I think separating out that, but for our audience who might be intuit things, is that I think really it's about leaving the 1% of the conscious mind. And I think the more one meditates, and we say clean, I know the word's been hijacked by the clean cult. If I like eating clean, well, I wash my food before I eat it anyway, so it's always clean. But so I think eating clean, what is that? But I think the I'd like to have that verified. I think kinesiology is very useful, and you can do your own testing. You can do sway testing by standing, and I've had many clients sort of do that in supermarkets, seeing which vegetables are appropriate for them and so on. But I think certainly if someone's really well and everything's well within them, and they've found that they're intuiting that they need ostensibly healthy food that's rich in nutrients and nutrient rich, and is and actually have the intuitive sense that they shouldn't be eating crap food and toxic and trans fats, then I guess you could say from the common sense perspective, well, your intuition seems to be appropriate because those seem to be nourishing foods. At the same time, toxic superfoods is a book to read, and it's like not all foods that are apparently good for us are actually good for us because they've actually got toxins in them and they may not be so good for us after all. So I think but ways of helping, I think daily meditation and daily practice of moving out of the practicing mindfulness or mindlessness would be useful. And then also having some means of verifying that. So whether you've got somebody else who can test these things for you with kinesiology. So basically you do a sort of like, okay, try this, okay, and then get tested by somebody else and see if it matches, see if it makes sense. But I think it's I think also maybe those individuals can intuit other things in their life, and if those things plan out, it can actually then you can apply a sort of a cross-discipline sense of confirmation. So otherwise, I would say, I mean, for me, I was taught a lesson by someone. I said, because I found that meditation was a space where, when I was quiet, all the crap thoughts I'd ever had all entered my head all at once. And I didn't find meditation very comforting because it was just like all the bad stuff. It's like, God, that wasn't very. All I'm doing is just worrying around with all the bad stuff. So I think I find it for me initially, having a guided meditation, listening to somebody describe something that I can envisage. So it's a visualization process that took me out of my mind and took me out of my thoughts. So I went out of my frontal cortex. And when I do the muscle testing, actually, I move now from the frontal cortex to the crown chakra, and then I come back through my heart chakra. And I was taught that process, and I do it so often. So boom, boom, boom. And by coming through the heart chakra, it takes away bias and other negative influences that might be present. Because one's ego, and nothing wrong with ego. Ego is a hugely important thing. A lot of people give it a bad rap, but you can have your own conformational bias, or your own bias gets to influence things, and it's very difficult to discern that, which is why I think it's good to sort of check on a few things. If you know someone who does kinesiology, or verify, again, as I said, in other aspects of life, which you can then show is true. But one man's meat is another's poison. Herodotus, 460 BC. So it's so I think if anything's working for you and it works, I think it's a good show. But if your health is not so good, whatever you're doing, it needs to be changed. Otherwise, you've got the definition of insanity from Einstein. So a good question. But I think, yeah, Qigong and Ren Zhu, of New Zealand. Ellen likes that too. So I think any means of mindfulness, leaving your mind and getting out of thoughts and really going to the gut and having an intuitive aspect. If we think about the enteric nervous system, this cell, when cell division and mitosis, when conception occurs, the 50% of the cell goes towards the brain and spinal cord. What's the other 50%? It's the enteric nervous system. So using the second brain. And women actually have a denser levels of certain nerve cells in the brain. Women have a denser level, and they've got you women, beautiful women, have a greater ease of accessing intuition than men. And so a fantastic podcast from some lovely American PhD on the subject who actually came across pretty well. Listen, it was fascinating. It's like exactly everything we've all known. Is that so basically the CEO or the president should be a woman, basically, full stop. But you need a man as number two as a strategist. Because of the man that, and that's probably the best. You need the yin and the yang. Neither one is better than the other, but you need you need them both together. A lot of this sort of this sort of division that's gone on in the world right now. The blues, the reds, they have or they haven't, have the jab, etc. Is division is of course is not ideal. So I think the again the combination. So it makes sense. You want probably not on bad PMT week. You don't want to have someone take charge of the world at that moment in time. But I think having the woman's brain, because women can see consequences. And men don't seem to see consequences and tend to be more aggressors. I mean, who starts a war unless you're a male leader of a country, for example? So it's yeah. So I think I think intuition is more likely to be accessed. So I've had to learn the hard way by making mistakes and having to eat humble pie. Make mistakes. My wife's just one bag of intuition. She just goes boom, straight there, and it's just and I think many women have a head start. So I think you've got the head start and accessing that. You'd be the learning curve will be all the greater if you're a woman than a man, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll meditate more.
Oh, I see. Yes, it's for oneself. I think it's letting go. I think the Mark Twain quote, which I love making quotes and remembering them, but Mark Twain, fantastic. I actually studied him for part of my English literature degree. I did that with sports science, and it's the things you think you know for sure that just ain't so.
Yeah.
I quite enjoy that, and I try and live that sense of things in the sense of I'm certain, maybe I'm not, oh no, that's absolute, maybe it's not absolutely correct. So I'm just sort of like and I think the four agreements or the five agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, which you might have read, the four agreements, and then his son Don Miguel Jr. Create the fifth one, which is be open to learning but be skeptical. I think the four agreements, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the four agreements, I think that way is also a useful, a secular way of existing. Although
Yeah.
I'm very much a belief in a higher power myself, but it's a great way to sort of don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally. Do your best, and there's one more I've got four of the five in my head, but there we go. So yeah.
It's on my list.
Yeah,
You're
yeah, it's a very good
inspired
read.
me to
It's
go
been,
ahead and read
I
it.
think,
Yeah.
I think 1 million books have been published or more. Next questions.
There's
Thank
a
you.
question from somebody about a TSH test, which the doctor said was normal, but it was 2.19.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah.
And she's gained 15 pounds within the last 2 years, although she's been very active. And the lab results said hypothyroidism. So she wants to know, and I know you're not a doctor, but maybe you can recommend certain things.
I'm
Should she
quite clued
take her
in with thyroid.
levothyroxine, and what else would you recommend?
Yeah.
She's also taking iodine from sea kelp drops.
Yeah, sea kelp also may contain some selenium, and actually you need adequate selenium in order to use the iodine properly. In fact, I would be cautious of anyone using iodine. I know David Brownstein bangs the desk about the need for iodine, but really the thyroid needs adequate selenium in order to use iodine properly, and vitamin A, by the way, as well. And you need copper to protect, again, copper to protect the thyroid. So TSH on its own is a useless marker for thyroid function. You should look at it in the pattern with T4 and T3 and look at free T3 and free T4. But even then, as Antony Hollenberg and Arturo Mendoza said in their paper in 2017, and they have super decades of research on thyroid, they said in no way whatsoever should you ever confuse serum levels with intracellular levels of thyroid, and yet there's no methodology of testing for intracellular thyroid. So blood tests are only a gauge. They are a gauge. They're useful. For me, it's useful in patterns. So if one test on its own doesn't really mean too much, but I want to put it into context with a person's health. If one person's gained weight and your TSH is 2.19, now I read a paper just yesterday because I gave a webinar on thyroid last week, and I gave I give more webinars on thyroid than any other subject, in fact, and it is one of the most common factors. It's amazing. I mean, 50% of 50-year-old women have a thyroid problem. 60% of 60-year-old women have a thyroid problem. 70% of 70-year-old women have a thyroid problem. It is millions and millions of people with subclinical hypothyroidism where TSH might be normal. But the thyroid, this is in a mainstream paper. They estimate that anything above 2.0 of TSH is a warning sign that something's wrong, and that's on its own, let alone looking at T4 and T3. But again, look at cortisol. If cortisol's too high, you've got an inhibition of the conversion of T4 to T3. And then there's DIO1, DIO2, and DIO3, which are deiodinase enzymes which convert the thyroid hormone. It gets a bit more complicated, but essentially blood tests are not so useful. Signs and symptoms are useful: cracked heels, dry skin, constipation, hair loss, poor memory, and certainly menopause can give an increased risk of thyroid issues, hence the increased percentage as women get older. And women are sometimes 5 to 10 times more likely to have subclinical hypothyroidism. And yes, levothyroxine may be worth a try. However, I would suggest you would consider the GTA Forte thyroid glandular with cofactors from Biotics Research. Now, it does potentially have a trace levels of hormones in it, but it means you can buy it as a supplement. So I found that probably the single most effective thyroid supplement I've ever used is GTA Forte from Biotics Research. Brilliant. And it's what David Brownstein uses himself. And he put that one together for Biotics, but I've used that for 25 years. It is the single most effective thyroid support, and I would definitely recommend one at breakfast or two at breakfast for that. To give you my answer, I know I speak very fast, but I hope you got the gist of that.
Well, they can re-listen to this recording.
Oh my
Mona
gosh.
adds some wisdom here. Kione affects calcium-gated transient receptor potentiation channels, including the TRPV1.
Yeah.
Depending on the individual's genetics, epigenetic consumption, TRPV1 agonists may exceed an individual's capacity to process TRPV1. Ginger too, and she believes horseradish and related things also affect the TRP. Curcumin
Thank
is
you.
an antagonist opposing TRPV1 and the impact of such things as Kione.
Thank you very much indeed. Mona sounds like she's got some sort of qualification in science, or basically is very well read and does research. Is great. It is, and I mean, thyroid issues are so complicated. I mean, the transporters. So it's production. You got conversion, metabolism, transporters. Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, just a geek. Fantastic compliment there. You're a geek. I'd love to be a geek too. I'm a nerd, and I think a nerd is on the way to geek. So we've got sort of the stages of compliments. I study hard. I'm really interested. I'm a nerd, and now I'm a geek.
And there's a recommendation on hydrogen water, checking out George Wiseman and AccuCure. That she's going to experiment with that.
Yeah,
And also
I
there's
think
something called Brown's gas, this entire mixture of combustible gas generated from machines specifically designed to electrolyze, that is, split water, and not to separate into resulting gases. It's a trifecta of hydrogen, oxygen, and electrically expanded water. It also contains water vapor, H2O2, HO, etc.
I've got stuff to learn.
And somebody's
Uh,
recommending transdermal magnesium. And
Yeah, that
also,
can be that can be useful. I found that the oil can be very irritating for skin for some, and certainly for me. I know you've got non-irritating sort of for sensitive skin transdermal magnesium as well. And again, it's a question of you need enough antioxidants in order for the magnesium to get back inside the red blood cell, and for a lot of people that means having adequate glutathione. In one study, just to end up, yeah, I've got to go for dinner.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I know one study they found that 50% of the people had, so basically everyone in the study had low magnesium. They gave everyone magnesium, and 50%, exactly 50% restored their magnesium and 50% didn't. So they tested everyone again for glutathione status. They found that the only people with low glutathione were those who couldn't restore their magnesium. Interesting, huh? When they gave them glutathione, they improved their magnesium. I thought, what a neat study.
Well, if you've got to go to dinner,
I've got to go
so
to dinner.
I want to thank you profusely. Your wisdom, I've got to go back and
Well,
write it
I
all
think
down because,
I'm not. Thank you, Ellen, and it's great to have you there, and Karen, and
and if
I would
you
say
could put your
wisdom.
information, how people can reach you.
Yeah, I put my email down again, so I'll put my email in there again. But I appreciate where the chat goes when we're off the call. I think that what I've expressed is clinical experience with knowledge, and I hope that one day wisdom will will come my way. So I'm just being appropriately appreciative of it. I'm not sure that I'm wise, but I have knowledge and I have clinical experience.
Well, I think you're fantastic. We're so lucky. I'm going to email you shortly after this. I thank
Yes.
you. Come back anytime to talk about anything. I mean,
Yeah, that
you're
copper
like a
thing. I tell you,
water hose. I just, can't absorb it all.
and then when you listen to it back, you think, was that on high speed or was that on normal speed? Anyway, it's like this.
Well, when I'm with you, you don't talk this fast. So
No,
it's
I know,
the
I know.
divine
Thanks,
spirit coming through you, wanting to get it out very quickly.
thanks, Yunshi. Yes, you're right. I've sort of got the fast pace. So apologies for, there are slow brain people, there are medium brain people, and there are fast brain, and there's no judgment. It is the way it is, and it's perfect as it is. But sometimes if you get that person talking to that person, it sometimes doesn't match. So apologize if it was too fast. I really do. It's difficult to contain me, even if I've known it for 33 years. Actually, I had a car accident, the last thing, that nearly killed me, literally nearly killed me when I was 21, or 2021. It was my second year of my degree. And I had post-concussion depression for a year, and it was, I can't remember anything about that year at all. And from that time on, I am actually been speaking quicker. So I think something, and I've really been aware of that. So I think something sped my brain up. I don't know what it is, but there we go. Yunshi, thank you so much. And English is your second language. I guess that much. And she has no problem following me. That doesn't mean to say that everybody else, because you're American, North Americans, and English, accent slightly different ears. Anyway, I'm going to push off because I've got a life apparently.
Well, thank you so much for imparting your spirituality, wisdom, big heart, knowledge, whatever you want to call it. It comes from the divine. So thank you. You're welcome back anytime. You
Yeah.
name it, we'll be here.